So, a little bit more about Dr. Carey as I invite her to the stage. I'm so excited to have her join us today. Dr. Carey is a behavioral scientist who specializes in work cultures. She is the founder of I Think Change, a behavioral research agency, and the author of several books, including Shut 'Em Down, Black Women, Racism in Corporate America, Everyday Struggle, How Toxic Workplaces Impact Black Women, both Amazon bestsellers in the category for business conflict, and Unbreak My Soul, How Black Women Can Begin to Heal from Workplace Trauma. Y'all, I'm so excited. Okay, let me continue. Core magazine has listed Dr. Carey as one of the most influential Blacks of 2022, and her work has been cited in Forbes, Glamour, and Social Work Today, and has been seen on CBS News. I've personally started to cite her work because she has so much knowledge. And after you all hear from her, I have to believe you all will be citing Dr. Carey as well. Dr. Carey is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and holds a PhD in higher education, leadership and research from Louisiana State University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carey Yazeed.
Hello, hello, and hello. So you all should be real energized right now, especially husband who won the contest with the bees. So, as you know, my name is Dr. Carey Yazeed. I am a behavioral scientist. I know I might not look like it, but yeah, actually, I like to study people. So I've been sitting in the back, people watching, observing you all and what it is that you do or what you don't do. So far, you pay attention during a conference, and I was like, okay, I got a good crowd, got a good audience, girlfriend, let's work it. So today, I am going to be talking to you about Black women, vulnerability, and them in the workplace. Now, you might be sitting there saying, behavioral scientist, lady from South Louisiana, what does any of that have to do with equity? Well, I'm glad that you asked, because I'm about to let you know. So, as I was preparing for this presentation, there was a quote by Audre Lorde that I felt summarized everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. But I feel that it also summarizes the experiences of Black women, not only in society, but in the workplace. It goes something like this. When we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. I want you to think about that for a second. Has there ever been a time that you have been in the workplace, or you've been in Trader Joe's, I don't know, Whole Foods, sitting down with your spouse, okay? And you spoke, but they didn't hear what you were saying. Work with me now. I want everyone in this room. When was there a time when you spoke and your words were not heard? Now, that doesn't mean that they were hard of hearing. They heard you, but then all of a sudden, what you were saying became something else. And your first thought was, they don't hear me. Now I want you to think about a time when you spoke and your words were not welcomed. When you said something and you were told to hush. We're not going to talk about that right now. Or no, that's no, we don't do that here. How many of you have had that experience? Raise your hand. And every hand in here should go up. Now, you may have desensitized the situation and said, oh, you know, that's normal, that's how things go. Now, I want you to think about a time when you were afraid to speak because of the consequences that you would have experienced. Raise your hands. Whatever that situation was that you thought about, I want you to imagine a Black woman. And if you're having a hard time, she up here in a big old yellow dress. Can't miss her. This is our lived experience every day. Every day, we have an experience where either we will speak and what we're saying is not being heard, or we will speak and what we are saying is not being welcomed. But there are also times when we speak and when we don't speak because we are afraid of the consequences that we will experience. So you're probably saying, well, you know, Dr. Yazeed, Dr. Carey, as people like to call me, what are those consequences? We get labeled. Like, I've been an angry Black woman. I've been a difficult to work with Black woman. I have been the Black woman that when I spoke, all of a sudden, you know, I don't think she's a good fit for our team. When did this start for me? When was my first experience? As a grad student. The year was 1992. Yes, I just told my age. You do the math. I was an intern student at Tulane University. I was majoring in social work. I was getting my master's degree. They had placed me at a middle school. Someone, a social worker over there, I heard it, ooh, bye, because I left there. Okay. I was a graduate student. They placed me at a middle school. First day I show up. Now, you all did the math, and some of you are probably like, is she in her 50s? Yes. I will be 54 on the 30th of this month. So I walk into the school, and at this time, there were metal detectors that you had to go through, and then you had to go through the guard who had the wand, and they still didn't catch anything? Okay. So I go through this, and he says, you have to go to the principal's office. So I said, why? You're not in uniform. So I'm trying to explain, principal's office, you're not in uniform. Okay, I go to the principal's office. I'm sitting there with middle schoolers. Do you know how old middle schoolers are? And so they look at me and they say, hey, new kid, why are you in here? Not in uniform. Or they're gonna call your mama. Okay. Finally, I go into the principal's office and she says, what's your parents' phone number? And I said, ma'am, I'm the intern from Tulane. So she takes a deep breath. She calls my supervisor. She says, come get your intern. She's been sitting down here for a whole hour because they had been looking for me, okay? They didn't realize I was sitting in the principal's office. Make a long story short, as I start this internship, there's a male teacher who starts to make inappropriate comments to me. And when I say inappropriate, they're sexual comments. As I would go into his classroom to pull out a student to work with, and I ignored them. I didn't ignore them. I didn't say anything. The reason that I did not say anything was because I was the first in my family to be going to grad school. I come from a family of Louisiana sharecroppers. Put that in a context. We're talking about Black folks that are getting paid pennies on a dollar to farm land. They were basically paid slaves, in my opinion. So for me to be at Tulane and to be in grad school and to be the first in my family was beyond a big deal. And I knew that. So I said, I'm not gonna say anything. Maybe he'll go away. Maybe he'll stop. He didn't. One day, he followed me into the bathroom. This is before we had unisex bathrooms, okay? This is the 90s. I'm looking, he's looking, why are you here? He wants to know, why won't I go out with him? Y'all, I look like I was in middle school, okay? He's old enough to be my dad. So I was like, this is uncomfortable. I need to get out of here. You know, he got a couple of hood words from me too. He finally moved out of the way. I still didn't say anything until the next day. I called my mom from a payphone. We did not have iPhones, okay? So she got the collect call. She knew it was important because I called her collect. When she answered the phone, the tears came. And she said, you go back to class, I've got it. My thoughts were, what is she going to do? My mom did not have a college degree. I'm at Tulane, and if you don't know what Tulane looks like, it was 10 of us in my graduate program, 10 meaning 10 African Americans, 10 Blacks, out of a class of almost 200. I go to class, I'm still uncomfortable. The next day when I go to class, there's all this buzz about the student who's being sexually harassed at her field placement and how, what was it that she wore? What did she say? What did she do to tempt him? That student was me, but I was being spoken of in third person or past tense as if I wasn't even there. To make a long story short, my case became a case study in my classes. No one asked me how I felt. No one asked me why I never said anything. The perpetrator, nothing happened to him. I was compared to Anita Hill, and if you know your history, at that time, she was on Capitol Hill talking about our dear Clarence. I was early 20s, 22 at the oldest. No one came to save me except my mom, who didn't have a college education. I later found out that she cussed everybody out, and you had to know my mama. She was short like me, and she cussed you out in a heartbeat. She didn't care. She cussed everybody out all the way up to the president's office. The consequence that I had for me being silent and my mother speaking on my behalf was that my internship at the middle school ended. I was moved to an internship closer to my home. I stayed on campus. I lost my graduate apartment. I had to move back home, which was 60 miles from Tulane. I had to commute every day to school. I felt that I was punished, not him. But my mother reminded me, you're a Black woman. You better get used to this, girlfriend. Everybody's not gonna always be on your side. Everyone's not gonna speak up on your behalf. You're gonna have to know when to speak, when to be silent. You're also gonna have to realize that sometimes even when you speak, people don't hear you. You go to Tulane, you get your degree so I can have this big old dinner party and tell everybody you're the first in the family. And we're gonna move on. And that is how I did the rest of my career in the field of social work. And it was 26 years. 26 of me being silent. Or sometimes I would speak and I wouldn't be heard. Or sometimes I would speak and what I had to say wasn't welcomed. I became desensitized. And I learned that you just don't cause any waves. You just go through the motions, Carey. Because for me, at that point, my end goal was to make sure that my clients were okay. People who looked like me, people who came from communities that I grew up in. I wanted to make sure they were okay. And to make sure that happened, sometimes I had to just roll with the punches. I said all of that to give you an introduction to who I am as a Black woman and why I do the work that I do. I'll tell you about the second time that I spoke up in my social work career when I was walking out the door, a little later. Since the summer of 2020, everybody has been talking about what? DEI. DEI. That has been the buzzword. And y'all started all of this. Started here. Am I right? Y'all don't remember. Yes, well, you had a situation that occurred where a man was murdered. It made international news, and it sparked that now it was cool to care about Black folk. It was cool to care about people who were different than you. It was cool to give a damn. Yeah, I'm the truth bringer. Some people don't like that. But anyway, so the buzz became DEI. And we saw organizations making this mad rush to all of a sudden have diverse pools. So they're out here hiring everybody. Diversity is the thing. We need diverse people. Half of them didn't know what diverse means. But if you were different from them, that's diverse enough. Come on in. They also made this move to include all of these diverse people that they hired. We have to include them, not really understanding what inclusion means either. But there was one thing that I saw missing during all of this. And guess what that was? Oh, you can guess. I like audience participation. Y'all not gonna say it. Equity. Who said equity? You almost won too. Okay, with the B's. Oh, we see you. Anyway, yes. So equity. So this morning, one of the speakers, two of the speakers, actually, we were talking and they heard that I was talking about equity and they said, oh, yeah, Black women and equal pay. And I said, no, that's not what we're talking about today. Because when we hear equity and we hear Black women or Black people or women in general, the first thing that everyone brings up is that we aren't paid the same as our white male counterparts. And then the conversation stops. It stops on that. But that's only a fragment of what equity is. And it's easier to focus, and I don't know why, but it's easier to focus on why you are not paying us the same as you pay everyone else versus focusing on treating us just and fair. Think about it. All of these other things that happen as a result of equity boil down to treating people just and fair. So what happened to treating employees, Black women, equally just and fair? Because y'all still haven't paid us what we were. The National Black Women's Equal Pay Day, and I think I said that right, started in 2020, so we're going on year 3. And last time I checked my bank account, we are still not being paid the same as our white male counterparts. I think a lot of these days are performative. They are to make certain people feel good. It does not make Black women in our bank accounts feel good. But it's the feel-good part that we need to focus on. Because if you make me feel good and you're treating me just, equally, and fair, that equal pay is gonna come. A lot of times what happens is that you don't understand us. And when I say you, I'm not just talking about whites, I'm talking about everyone, because sometimes Black women don't understand other Black women. And Black women don't understand African American women. So we have some division within our own group. But when we talk about treating people just, equally, and fair, that goes back to psychological safety. So that was the other buzzword that came about around the same time. Am I right? Yes, no? Y'all started hearing psychological safety, and I guess some of you were just like, okay, and what does that mean? You've given us a new word, a new phrase, but what does it mean? It was actually coined by a professor out at Harvard. And basically, psychological safety is when there is an absence of interpersonal fear, and a person can show up as their authentic self. That is psychological safety in a nutshell. Black women do not have psychological safety in the workspace. We do not feel safe, and I have the research to prove it. I got tired of people talking about what our experiences were, and I saw that they were getting it wrong. So I did my own study. It's on my website, free to take a look at if you want to, drcareyyazeed.com. Anyway, and I don't just look at Black women, I look at all women in the workplace. But the numbers don't lie in regards to what we go through and how we're feeling in these spaces. And I think the part that baffles me is that we say what's going on, I'm giving you data that shows what's going on, and no one's doing anything except talking about paying us fairly. And notice I said talking, because it's been 3 years. And like I said, my bank account's still looking like, girl, when they gonna do something? And I'm like, girl, I don't know. The second time that I spoke up, because it's only been twice in my career. Once when I was coming in the door as a social worker. The second time was when I was walking out the door as a social worker. I was a professor, had just earned my PhD. So y'all know I was real happy. Family happy, she got a good job. That's what Black folks say. Old Black folks, she got a good job, so I had a good job, okay? I started in August. Labor Day, my dad died. My mother had died 10 years before, so this was my last parent. I'm the oldest. That means you show up and you take care of what needs to be done. I showed up. Now, I don't know if you know what that means in a Black family. That means you mediating family members, the coroner, the funeral home, the people who want to have a repast, you keeping people from killing each other, okay? That takes a lot of skill to enact all of my social work skills. By that Friday, I received a phone call from my dean, who had not communicated with me up until this point. So what do you think he told me? What was that phone call about? I'll take guesses. Bingo. And it wasn't when are you coming back to work. The conversation was one-sided, and it basically went, at the university, we only have 2 days for funeral leave. You have used your 2 days. We expect you back on Monday and teaching these classes. Now, you gotta know me to know in my mind, I was thinking, man, damn, I ain't even buried my daddy, because he was being buried the next day. So now I'm trying to keep family members from killing each other, dealing with a funeral home that's trying to rip us off on prices. You can negotiate a funeral. I did it. And I tried to do a lesson plan to go back on Monday. I showed up on Monday. No one asked, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Do you need anything? I was told, well, the reason we didn't send a card or a plant is because you didn't tell us where the services were. Your stuff's in your mailbox. Hope you have a great week. And I said, what in the entire hell have I got myself into? I thought this, but I smiled and I said, okay, thank you. A week later, an older male student started stalking me. And when I say stalk, he had my schedule down to a science. And he would show up when I got off the elevator, walk me to classes, and he would throw in, why won't you go out with me? And I would respond, because you're a student and I'm a professor. Can you leave me alone? This continued. One day, I was sitting in my office. It was in the evening, because I taught night classes. I heard my door close, and the fear rose, because my door locked from the outside. So if someone tried to get in, it was locked. When I looked up, it was the student. So it's just him, myself, air and opportunity. And he again wants to know, why won't you go out with me? Why do you keep avoiding me? Backstory, I grew up in the hood, okay? So at this point, I'm not answering him. I assessed him, I was like, oh, he a big one. He about 6'2", 6'3". I got on heels. So if I kick him in his groins and I take my cell phone, I can break his nose when he bends down and get out the door. I'm thinking about my safety. I reach for my cell phone. He runs out of my office. I close the door because I know he can't get back in, and I cry. And it's that uncontrollable, nasty cry that you do when you're by yourself. And I waited till my students showed up, because I taught an all-female class, and told them that class was dismissed. This continued, okay? I notified my dean, the same dean who told me I only got 2 days for funeral leave. He calls campus police, then I'm summoned into his office, and I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna do something, right? Right? Wrong. I am told that, all you had to do is just go out with the guy. You're pretty, you're single, like this is just a waste of time and paperwork. And I was just, where's the female officer? Because I used to work with sexual assault victims. Oh, we don't have one. Yes, you do. Where is she? Well, she's not coming. And my first thought was, no one's coming to save you. And I sat there and I said nothing else. When I walked out, I immediately went into action of, I need another job. This is not going to work. You worked in higher ed, you can say that till the cows come home, but it might not happen for a year or two later. In the meantime, the student continued to stalk me and follow me around campus, pop up. And I said nothing because no one was hearing me. And when I spoke, my words were not welcomed. I was told that I was whining, that I wasn't a team player, and I just needed to learn how to ignore him. A year later, I was sitting in a staff meeting, and there was a conversation about classes that I taught. Long story short, I was like, yeah, I made the students take the books back. They can't pay their rent. I told them to go buy the book used on Amazon. What's the big deal? You can't do that. They have to buy the book new. No, they don't. My dean, the same dean, bangs on the table and tells me to shut up. Okay, first of all, you don't tell a Black woman to shut up, okay? You don't tell a Black woman who now has PTSD from the traumatic event that she experienced that no one did anything about to shut up. He bangs on the table again. My ears start to ring. My hands start to shake. I gather my belongings. We're in a staff meeting. And as I'm leaving, he says, everything that has happened to you this past year, you deserved it. My dad died. I've been stalked by this student. So if you're a Black woman, you pretty much can imagine how that ended. I spoke up. Now, what I had to say wasn't nice and professional, but I spoke up. So guess who called me the next day? HR. To inform me that, guess what, girl, you have 300 unused hours because you used to work for the state and you never took sick leave, so you can take FMLA and don't come back. And I said, thank you, you're my best friend, I won't. But no one else spoke up for me. No one was there to save me. And when I did speak up, what I went through, no one cared. And so when I tell you that Black women go through this process in their heads of when to speak, when not to speak, and when to be silent, it is daily. But most of the times we choose silence. In a study that was done in 2021 with Black women leaders in K through 12 education, they identified that there were several elements that were either there or missing that influenced the progression of their careers. Toxic work environments was one of the themes that showed up in this study. Toxic work environments are real, and it doesn't just impact our careers, but it also impacts us as individuals. And so if we're talking about equity, again, we have to remember that it's not just about the money for us. It's about working in environments where we are welcomed and we feel safe. both physically and emotionally. People want to know, why aren't Black women vulnerable in the workspace? Why don't we speak up? Fear is the #1 answer. Discomfort, not having a safe environment, lack of representation, meaning we don't see us in the workspace. Sometimes it's just us. Sometimes we don't have Black women leaders that we can go and have a conversation with. We also lack support. I talked about the workplace fears. It's us being labeled. You're aggressive, you're angry, you're difficult to work with. It's us not being taken serious if we show up in cornrows or locks or with the head wrap, that all of a sudden we're unprofessional. These are fears that we deal with as we navigate the professional world. But this is also what equity is about. So what happens when a Black woman doesn't exhale? Well, I shared my story. She snaps. She has PTSD. I did. Had anxiety, depression, and it took me years to overcome it. Some women have health issues such as diabetes, heart problems, high blood pressure. That's not because of our diets. That's because of the work environments that we're in. It's because of the systemic racism that we deal with in society when we come out the womb. Because it starts with us before day one, if we're going to talk about maternal health care. So we deal with all of these things, and then we still show up and give you 100% in silence. So let's get to the point. How do you create an equitable workspace? Black women, because I'm gonna speak to 3 groups: Black women, leaders, and everybody else. Black women, stop waiting for somebody to give you permission to speak up. Stop. It is okay to push back. It's okay to say what you have to say. And yes, we know that there may be consequences, but there are also consequences when you're silent and you don't say anything. Know your rights. Contact the union, contact EEOC, contact the Anti-Defamation League, contact an employment lawyer. No one told me these things. When Black women are not in the room and someone is saying something negative about them, speak up. Use your voice. When she's the most qualified person, speak up for your sister. Use your voice. Communicate with I statements, because y'all know when we get mad, it can become you, we, they, I. What issues are you having? And document. Y'all know how that goes, CYA. I don't need to tell you what it is. Document, document, and document. Because it might come in handy one day. Know when you can't fix a situation at a job. Know when you've done all that you can do and it is time to leave. And sometimes entrepreneurship might be the route that you have to go, even if it's just for a while. Leadership. You need to know several things. 1, representation matters. Black women need to see other Black women in the workplace. That's what equity looks like. You can't hire one Black woman who might be a Black woman with a Muslim last name, and y'all, I got a silk press, but I'm usually wearing a big old afro. You can't hire me and talk about you done checked off, we did diversity. No, you did not. You hired one Black woman. Inclusion matters. And when we say inclusion, it does not mean hire us and then make us the DEI committee, the DEI department, or to speak up on behalf of all Black people in the world. I don't know them all. I'm only speaking for me. And yes, money matters. So yes, you do need to pay us. You need to pay us what we're worth. And safety matters. When we tell you we are unsafe, you need to figure it out. Because guess what? I've just told them don't be silent anymore, and they can contact an employment lawyer. To our non-Black coworkers, use your platform, use your position, use your power. You have it. And when you see something happening to us, speak up. And don't wait till we get to the water cooler after the fact and say, girl, I saw what happened. I need you to speak up then. Not at the water cooler after it's over with, because you're trying to protect yourself. Protect us. Hold space for Black women. You want to talk about equity? Use your office. Let us come in and have a conversation, and don't judge us on what it is that we're talking about. Listen, and listen to hear what we are saying, welcome what we are saying, and encourage us to not be silent. Support employee resource groups, which are being cut every day. Support employee assistance programs. If you're not going to have the safe space within your building, have a program where they can go and have a conversation with a mental health counselor, and you pick up the tab. That's equity. Celebrate our accomplishments. Don't steal them. Celebrate them. And last but not least, when you are wrong, all we want is an apology. My name is Dr. Carey Yazeed. I'm a behavioral scientist. Welcome to my TED Talk.